All right, so DiDi, of course, is making waves on the New York Stock Exchange now. And of course, many of you maybe do not recognize that company name. So we thought, hey, let's bring together some experts to really talk about where and who DiDi is. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back to TechPath. DiDi is basically the Chinese Uber. And in fact, actually, they've got a pretty good history with Uber in their acquisition of Uber China. And they've really moved into what I think is one of the most aggressive rideshare networks on the planet, including here in the United States. Today, we're going to get Taylor Ogan on with us from Snowbull Capital. Great to have you on the show, Taylor.
Thanks for having me on again, Paul.
Excellent. Taylor, so I would look at you as pretty much one of our lead go-to analysts that really understands not only the Chinese companies, the Chinese people, but also the financial side of things in terms of companies like DiDi that have really kind of been looming in the wings to get this public offering out. And of course, now it's happened today. The stock opened just a few hours ago, and some pretty interesting actions. So tell us a little bit about what DiDi does and what are your first thoughts on the company itself?
Yeah, so DiDi is, they call themselves a people company. It's not a ride-sharing company, but I like to call it a mobility company. And a lot of people compare it to Uber and to Lyft. It is quite different, actually. They obviously do ride-sharing and everything, and they started with taxis the same way that Uber and Lyft did. But just in terms of, first of all, the scale we can talk about that. It's a lot bigger company, and it's valued at way less right now, even just with it priced in on the highest end of what we were thinking. And it's still, this is an $86 billion company versus Uber and Lyft. It's a fraction of what they are, and it's profitable the last 2 quarters.
Right.
But just in terms of how many rides, how many active users they have 493 million active users. Uber only has 93 million in the entire world. So the scale is very different, and it's hard to understand if you haven't seen just how many of these vehicles there are in China personally. But it's also, you can have your furniture delivered. You can, if you have too much to drink at dinner and you want your car to be still driven home with you in it, they have a service for that. So they have lots of different. They have electric vehicle charging stations. They have 88,000 electric vehicle charging stations, whereas Tesla has 24,000 in the entire world superchargers. So even for that, the scale is massive. Every single part of DiDi is also very data heavy, which we can get into as well. But it's more than just a ride-sharing company. You can have your dog taken to the groomer through DiDi. They also have bike sharing, which is very big. It started in China, and DiDi was one of the first. They have food delivery. They have a lot of other super specialized services for people in China on the mobility side. And they also partner with cities to get their data, so they have all the traffic information. So it's a lot more than just the Uber of China.
So I want to just kind of go to a point here. Let me jump to a quick review on this. This is kind of one of the interesting things that I thought was rolling here with DiDi is one, and as you mentioned, they definitely are kind of a different style of company, obviously, than what Uber was. I was just looking back on the recent kind of this whole scenario with Uber and DiDi, in essentially DiDi kind of pushing Uber out of China and then eventually acquiring Uber China, which I also looked at DiDi's overall driver volume. They're over 4 million drivers with DiDi right now in China. So
15 million across everything.
Across really? Okay, so that's Wikipedia is wrong.
That's how many. Yeah, a lot of that is outdated. That's how many. Uber every single day in the entire world does 15 million rides on average.
Right.
DiDi has that many drivers doing a lot of rides per day. So that's a good comparison for scale.
Well, obviously, yeah, and you're dealing with billions in the population size, so obviously that is a big. Now, granted, a lot of that is
Right.
not necessarily in urban centers within China, but it definitely is the largest potential. And of course, some of the trends that we are seeing, and also China's identified is that they are looking at more urbanization, which is interesting to me,
Right.
in the sense that they're seeing a lot more manufacturing centralization in some of the provinces. And obviously, we've seen the massive moves into these places, mainly for work and for economic reasons, for startups and businesses of that nature. But when you look at DiDi, the potential for this company is much greater than just a ride-sharing application and a ride-sharing service. They're, one, Uber I just saw this week, the kind of the big push on Uber Business, which is the kind of the peer-to-peer delivery service, same day, mostly more in the tune of a courier service. And when I looked at that, I thought, this is interesting that this is even a thing right now with just the aspect. I just really feel like Uber's still falling a little bit behind the times in terms of where their potential strategies are going. And they've also bailed off of a lot of their tech. They bailed off of their drone concept. They bailed off the idea of autonomy. They've moved out of one of the major markets, being, kind of forced out one of the major markets in China. And then you have a company like DiDi moving in quickly here. What is the potential of DiDi to actually go outside of China and really start to move into the ride-hailing business in other countries?
So DiDi right now is in 4,000 cities around the world and 15 different countries. So it already has expanded quite a bit. But if you're talking about the United States, DiDi, they are testing some of their autonomous vehicles in California, but I don't think that they really want to try to crack the U.S. market unless they offer a different product. That's what they've said. And by the way, the company is led by two great people, Chung Wei, who started the company, and then her name is Jean Liu. Her dad was the founder of Lenovo, but she's a really smart woman. She's the president of the company, and she went to Harvard and studied computer science, really smart, went to Goldman Sachs actually, and when they were trying to invest in DiDi, and they weren't fast enough because their due diligence process was too long. And she was an MD there. And she said, all right, well, if I can't invest in you because we were too slow, then can I join you? And so she joined the company, and she's led it very well. And by the way, that's something that we see a lot with these Chinese companies. BYD is another example. Their president of BYD North America, Stella Li, she pretty much runs a lot of BYD. And so these women in China in business, they're a lot higher. For DiDi, for example, 30% of their manager level positions are held by women. In the United States, the average company, that's less than 4%. So it's a lot more common to see that, and it really, she's done a phenomenal job. So she said that, unless they offer a really specialized product, because Uber is in a lot of cities already, right? And that's the thing about China that Uber was never able to really crack, because DiDi is just such a dominant player. So with the United States and expanding, I don't know if it will necessarily be the United States unless, again, they offer a very different product. But in this IPO, they raised $4 billion. And that's actually tied with the third largest IPO that they've ever had. Cap raise that they've ever had. So they've had much larger ones, and Apple is an investor in them. Alibaba, Tencent, SoftBank owns 21.5% of the company. So those are some of the most powerful names in the entire world, right? And they're investing in DiDi and have been since 2015. So with all of those partners, they also have a lot of, so with this raise actually, 30% of the proceeds will go to R&D in autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles, that alone. So that's $1.2 billion. That's almost Tesla's, just for comparison, that's almost Tesla's entire R&D spend. Then 30%, another 30% is going to go into actually international expansion. and then 20% kind of for finances and everything, and then another 20% for new products. So that's $1.2 billion to expand into other countries. They're already in 4,000 cities across the world, 15 countries. They're expanding like crazy. I just don't know if it's going to be the United States just quite yet.
Yeah, which is, I mean, if you look at where some of the major centers of growth are, they're actually outside the U.S., both in Asia, Europe, and South America. We've seen, some massive growth in Brazil around ride-hailing. Also, the numbers coming in from Southeast Asia, growing very fast. So, with ride-hailing as being kind of one of the cores, I should say, but at the same time, just their innovation around what they're doing with DiDi Labs, because it seems like this company is a lot bigger than what a lot of people anticipated. Why do you think they opened up at the opportunity in terms of investment with what they went public for?
Well, I think that it's interesting that they went public in the United States, first of all. So a lot of these Chinese unicorns are going public just in China, which is very frustrating for a lot of American investors because they can't buy them.
Can't get to
which
it.
Is, I mean, that's what my company does. We allow people to buy these things that they otherwise wouldn't be able to, and it's super frustrating for other people who can't invest with us to have to miss out on these opportunities. DiDi, fortunately for a lot of people, was able to list in the United States on the New York Stock Exchange today, and that's great news for DiDi. I think it was a smart move. There's a lot more attention to DiDi, and that's something that DiDi has been toying with. They wanted to do this perfectly, and I think so far it looks like they have.
Yeah, a good point. So they've got self-driving and V2X technologies, which basically are developing technology in areas such as computer vision, perception, HD mapping. They're testing autonomous vehicle fleets, both in the US and in China. Also with this, they've got this whole thing around predictive algorithms. So it sounds to me like they're already way in down the track in terms of trying to address the autonomous scenario, which is really any ride-hailing company. That's the holy grail for them, whether it's, in the next 5 years or the next decade, at some point down the road, autonomy is going to play a big factor in this. How close do you feel like DiDi is on the track to potentially becoming a company that could actually have autonomous, in other words, robo-taxis?
Yeah, they are better positioned than any other company in the world. That is a given. They already have the network. They already have all of the users. They already have all the data. They have every single, even the charging stations they have the cleaning facilities, things that people don't think about when you are going to actually have a real robo-taxi fleet. You need to clean the things. You need to charge them. Right? So all of these things, they're already experimenting with sensor cleaning and which is a pretty big issue for every single company. But they already have a fleet of 100 robo-taxis, level 4, in Shanghai. They've been doing a test in Shanghai since last summer. And now they just got a few more licenses to expand beyond that. And again, they're also testing in California. And that's something that with robo-taxis, again, you have to have, first of all, the network. So they have the network. And then, but you also have to, what I like so much about DiDi in their robo-taxi aspirations is that they're very realistic about it, really realistic. In terms of the timing, they've never said robo-taxis next year and then the next version 2 weeks out. They've been very, very good about where they really see robo-taxis and also how robo-taxis will play into mobility. And what I mean by that is that they say that in a city, let's say that they do have a robo-taxi fleet, there's still going to be routes that they would prefer to have a human drive, just because they're more complex and everything. Whereas the more simple routes, that's where they're first implementing these robo-taxis. That's a very realistic approach. You don't need to have every single car on the road be autonomous. That's just, in a lot of places, that may never happen. So they're very realistic in that sense. They're very realistic in their timing. They've never debated sensors. Every single day almost, there's a new picture of a DiDi testing all types of new LiDARs in different positions on different cars. So they have all that. And then the big thing that no one is talking about is this partnership and this car that they partnered with BYD to develop, and they're already on the road. There are tens of thousands of them on the road in China, and that's that D1. It's the avocado color car, and that was a purpose-built car for ride-hailing. It's the first of its kind in the entire world. And that was done through a joint venture that BYD and Didi have, and that's called Mayhow. And BYD has 60% of that. Didi has the 40%. And they surveyed on Didi's platform hundreds of thousands of drivers and users. And they said, what would be the perfect car? And it's everything from where the cup holders are to how many USB ports and how much headroom you need, how much legroom you need. But also for the drivers, they have some of them. I've been in plenty of taxis and Didis in China, and the drivers have all of these different phones with different apps, and they're trying to get the next ride, and they're trying, very quick, and they're distracted actually. And so with this, they have just one orange button on the steering wheel, that's Didi's color, and the driver just presses that when they want to accept a new ride. And the infotainment system is designed by both of them, by Mayhow. The passengers, they have karaoke. There are karaoke microphones. I mean, so the driver's seat is reinforced because after, some of these people are driving 90,000 miles a year in them. And so, this is also the battery pack. It's an LFP battery. It uses BYD's Blade battery.
Right.
And so they can charge, they don't have to taper like with most other batteries. So they can charge it right up to 100% state of charge. And they even have this, like, a lot of drivers have coins and cigarettes and whatever that they need to, because there are up to 3 people per one of these Didis, these D1s. And so you have drivers going through them 3 times a day. And so they have the center console just slips out and you can carry it like a lunchbox, and that's where all your personal belongings, little tiny details like that. And people are going crazy for these cars in China. People are actually upset that you can't buy the cars. You can only lease them if you're a Didi driver. And so it's very competitive among the Didi drivers. And Didi, by the way, pays BYD about 23 cents per kilometer that it carries a fare-paying passenger. And that alone, if you just do some back of the paper napkin math, that really adds up to some serious money for BYD and Didi. And especially, they plan to have 1 million of these on the road by 2025. And then in 2027 and 2028, they plan to start removing the cockpit, meaning make it autonomous. And by 2030, they hope that all of these D1s that are on the road
fully robotic
will be fully autonomous. So they already have the cars that are purpose-built. No other company has that. So they are very, very realistic and leading in autonomous vehicles so far.
So this strategy seems to be one that is going head-to-head with Tesla, obviously. Even though with Tesla, I'm definitely all in on Tesla and kind of their future and their mission. So I was, to a certain extent, try to at least position that. But I have been a bit concerned with Tesla's advancement, especially in this area around robotaxi and kind of where that potentially could go, because Tesla still may be years away from that. Even though recent with Tesla Vision, we just did a video on this, I was very impressed with what Karpathy had to say about their advancements. But when you look at a company like Didi, I'm looking at, well, this is great because these guys are actually, now pulling off application with BYD, who is a company that is vertically integrated, much like Tesla, and has a lot of potential upside, and the ability to handle capacity there within the country of China, which I think is going to obviously be the springboard for Didi to kind of test all this stuff and then roll these out into other countries. 14 million drivers. The amount of data they're collecting from those 14 million drivers has to be giving them just superior data sets in terms of autonomy, and not only that, logistical benefits in terms of productivity, making these vehicles work faster, smarter, easier, produce a lot more in terms of the ride-hailing side of it, package delivery, all that kind of thing. Do you think that's their strong suit, is the data side of things?
The data side, of course, is spot on. Except I would say that the quality of data that Tesla has per one vehicle. If we're just comparing one vehicle to one vehicle, it has more cameras, and so it can theoretically see more. But DiDi also has camera facing out in most of their vehicles forward, and then also facing the driver. So they have glance detection, which is super important, actually. If you ask anyone in the autonomous vehicle space, that's something that Tesla doesn't have.
It's coming.
Yeah, well, they have the cameras, the cabin-facing cameras, but you can see the quality of those. It's a pinhole. So, but these are real cameras. They can see the pupil very clearly in all different conditions. So they have that data, which a lot of people do not have, and I find that very interesting. But
much like dash cam is what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's pretty much
more like dash cam. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And so, but they also have all of the telemetry from the devices themselves, because the devices are always on. And so they have all of that. They can, and so for DiDi, DiDi actually has a very low profit margin per ride compared to, it's only 3% versus Lyft and Uber are in the 20% area. So why is it that, and DiDi is more profitable? So how is that? It just shows how valuable the data is for DiDi. They can pay the drivers less, thereby the fares are much lower. If you can't even compare the two, that's really why Uber lost out. Uber was losing money every single day. They're pouring in $15 million when they're trying to crack into China. And they're basically giving free rides. I was actually in China when that was happening, and they had people from California standing on the streets with like flyers saying, "This is Uber. It's like DiDi, but it's American, and it's not integrated with WeChat. It's not integrated. It's its own app." And people didn't like that. So, and I took advantage of it. I just got free rides all over the city. But yeah, it didn't stick. So then that forced Uber to basically sell its business, its China business, to DiDi. So Uber and DiDi, they actually are invested in each other, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, in terms of the other data that DiDi collects, and this is a great reason that DiDi is kind of bulletproof with the antitrust laws with the Chinese government. DiDi is very, very much a partner of the Chinese government in terms of the data. So DiDi shares a lot of the car data, right? Just how it's mostly the speed, but also heavy braking and everything that would indicate traffic. They share that with the cities, and the cities have opened up their systems to DiDi, and so DiDi can see where every single bus in almost every single city in China is. They also about 6 years ago, they started tapping into the traffic lights. So DiDi put a device in almost every single traffic light in major Chinese cities, and not only to monitor when they are red, yellow, or green, but also to now change the lights to have better flow. And what you can see in all of this is that DiDi's payment platform its whole system is a mileage, kilometer-based. That's how people pay, is how far I'm going. It doesn't matter with time. And so that incentivizes drivers to not sit in traffic. They want to get there faster so they can get on to the next ride that will then go 4 kilometers. Then the next one, instead of waiting in traffic for 35 minutes. So sometimes the drivers actually know what route to take better than what is suggested. And so GPS. they started putting all that together. But the main thing is this traffic data. So DiDi has all the data on every single bus in a city. It also has the data on every single government vehicle. It also has recently, last year, they got the camera data, the traffic camera data, and they can see now it's incredible. So if you compare it to Tesla, Tesla only has Tesla vehicles on the road. It doesn't have anyone else's data. And so when you talk about V2X, vehicle to grid, vehicle to vehicle to everything, that's 5G enabled. China has 5G like crazy, whereas my 5G phone today dropped 3 calls. So the United States
with this kind of technology, would this enable somewhat of a mobile grid network in play, to where these vehicles basically are reporting, real-time conditions? I mean, if you could,
they already are.
If you could apply that to their transportation logistics system, I mean, that's going to give you real-time data even better than the traditional camera systems that you usually monitor traffic and things of that nature. I could see this being a big advantage to London because of the amount of surveillance that London is doing in terms of what's happening within the city. Man, that could be a huge benefit to a city like London, if it was an active network and you had enough of them.
So just doing the traffic lights in one tier 3 city in China, the first one that they tested it, traffic was reduced after Didi put the system in. Traffic was reduced by 22%. That alone. Now you have all of the other, and the data obviously just gets better. There's a difference between big data and deep data. Big data is just a big data set. Deep data is really what you do with it. And so they have a big data set, but they also basically make sense of that data, and that gets a lot better, obviously, the more data they have. So now, I think the latest figure in the top 5 cities in China, Didi alone has reduced traffic by 18% overall. That's crazy. That's one company that's doing this. Whereas Uber, for example, they use the accelerometer in the driver's phones to see if they're going too fast, but that's really the only thing they have. And so the quality of the data is incredible for what Didi has.
Yeah, this company looks like it is poised to just explode in terms of growth. Why would they look at going the route of an IPO here in the United States? Is it just to get the exposure from the U.S. financial population? Where do you think this is going long term? This seems just like a very, minute step in what they could be doing as a company.
It's a really good question, Paul, because I was asking myself the same. And again, it was tied for their 3rd largest cap raise. They've had larger cap raises in 2017. So by quite a bit more, $5.5 billion. This is only $4 billion. Yeah. So do they need the money? They were able to turn a profit last quarter because they sold $2 billion in their own investments. They also are investing in Gojek, and Grab, companies all over Southeast Asia, all over the world. And so they're making actually a lot of money from their own investments. And then also with that, guess whose data they get from all of that? So, and they also get to share their data with those companies. I mean, it's such a beautiful thing. And so why did they go public? Yeah. Some people, there's maybe not a theory, but some people say that because we didn't know most of their financials. It was a big mystery. No one knew how many rides unless one of these two people who lead the company, like if Gene said it in an interview. That was the only thing we could get. And it was like, wow, that's 4 million more rides per day than the last time we had that stat. Like so we didn't know a lot about it. So when they have to file for their IPO, there was a 126 page, S1. So it
Disclosure, yep.
Yeah, so we got to see everything, and it was, the second it came out, we didn't sleep. So we've been and that only came out 2 weeks ago. So combing through that has been really awesome to see, and I think, and this is what other people think as well, that maybe they just Didi wanted to kind of show people this is where we're at. We are making money on every single ride we have. That's not true with Uber. And Uber Eats, that saved Uber in terms of real profitability. But Didi, we got to see everything.
So this is kind of like a self-governance, so to speak, for them, in the sense that this is a small cap raise for them if you compare it to where their investors are coming from, like Tencent, Alibaba, et cetera. They could go to the Chinese public markets with the companies that are within China especially, who already know, hey, listen, we can drop as much money as you want, just offer the shares up and let's go to work. So coming to the U.S., a little bit of self-governance here.
By the way, only 6% in this offering.
That's what.
So they didn't need to do it.
It's crazy.
So exactly, they're kind of showing their hand, and they're saying this is where we're at.
Interesting.
Here's a peek under the curtain, and
do a little strut.
People are shocked. Yeah, right. And they deserve this victory walk. But
I like it.
It's really, this is why I said we've been waiting for years for this. And so this is a very exciting
Kramer jumped all over this. He was up in arms about Didi. You got to get into Didi. In court. That almost made me go away from Didi. Just so you know. with where Kramer's
Yeah, a lot
going,
of people
because
said that. Yeah.
his picks have been a little bit. Okay, so despite tensions in 2020, we're seeing Chinese companies raising like 12 billion. Almost 8 billion has been raised by China firms so far in 2021, more than triple the amount reached the same point last year. If you look at DiDi being the emblematic of both trends, here's my question. Sure, people get exposure to them. They learn more about it. They're probably going to create a lot of China curious investors, people that want to know more about places like BYD and other companies like that, including many of these transportation and tech companies that have really they're unknown here in the United States. So I feel like this is almost, do you feel like this was orchestrated in any way by the CPC?
No, I don't, because they actually are kind of not upset, but they're missing out. They would have loved for this to have gone public in China, especially on the STAR market.
Sure.
But yeah, a lot of people thought that they would go public on the STAR market, but it was kind of a shock, I'd say, that they chose the New York Stock Exchange to do this, especially with how some of these Chinese IPOs have not been doing well this year and last year. So it was interesting. I don't think it was orchestrated at all like that, but it has given a lot more attention to other companies, you're right, in the space that aren't listed directly in the United States. And so like BYD is a great example. That D1 has been, and it says on the car, build your dreams, BYD. And they've been showing that on CNBC all week. And that's the first time you will ever hear CNBC talk about BYD. And they never said even BYD's name, but they're at least showing the car. In their filings, it's littered with pictures of, because they don't really have anything else to actually show a picture of, other than maybe the same shot of a driver sitting behind a steering wheel and some of their bicycles. But the D1 was all over, different angles, different colors, and so that's promoting, thereby promoting BYD as well. So I think you're right. I don't think that it was orchestrated by the government, but it's an interesting theory.
I think that's going to be the key here, and I'm trying to pull up the D1. It looks like I have it right here on screen. So this this is the one that they've been kind of mentioning, which is that there goes back to that Lime version that you're talking about, which is the vehicle that they're definitely propping. So this is really kind of the evolution of where this could be a big game changer for BYD, because with DiDi's impact and their reach, BYD's capacity to make these vehicles, you start to integrate all these little elegant design features that just make it both good for, because think about it, Uber's not doing any of this. So you've got a complete disadvantage from Uber, which really to me is one of the things that I'm watching very closely, in the sense of, does DiDi, maybe this is a global play to really kind of get the populations in a lot of these countries ready for the next level. I mean, you saw that right there with climate control from the app itself. Yep. That is insane. I love that just in my Tesla feature, but you're not going to find that in an Uber ride anywhere. Right. So unless they're going into integrated partnerships, and Uber has not indicated any kind of integrated partnerships to move in this direction. So, very interesting. SoftBank surely is shaking in their boots a little bit on this one.
No, it's been a great investment for them. And this D1, we've crunched the numbers. I literally spent, I think the Excel sheet has 88 hours on just this model of this car that you're looking at, the potential that car has, and it is massive. It is actually, it's just, I don't want to give away too much, but it is that car that you just saw could be the biggest thing for mobility in a long time. And actually, even like another feature that, just as you played that, I remembered, the right-hand side door is like a minivan door. It slides open, but if you notice on the other side, it's a door that, regular door. So the reason they did that is because they have all this data, and they found that 91% of all rides you pick up and drop off on the right-hand side. So there's no need to actually even have that kind of expensive motor for the other side. Those are just little things that it's just wow. And then the lights change based on because all these cars look the same, right? If you're coming out of a soccer game or a concert or something, and there are all of these all over the parking lot, how do you see which one's yours? Well, you can change which light, and you can have it flash. People are getting into Morse code with their flashes compared to others people's. Mine's a purple flicker, and then someone else's. So they have all of these little details, and yeah, that car, it even has the wiring for when the time comes to actually start putting a lot of these sensors like LiDARs and cameras and radars, ultrasonics. It already has the wiring for it. It has the mounts for it. It has even the screws, where the holes for the screws to go. So they're not saying we're going to go with this system and this exact camera or this LiDAR specifically right now, because they still need time. But they're ready for when that time comes. And that's why they already have a fleet. And also those cars alone, we've crunched the numbers, and that fleet of, even if it's just 1 million cars on the road, based on how many rides they're doing per day and the utilization, because they're all electric, that will offset more barrels of oil than Tesla's entire fleet, we estimate, in the same year. And this is only 1 million cars, whereas Tesla, there's already well over 1 million Teslas on the road. So it's the scale of that little, again, I always smile because it's this little avocado color lime green thing that no one else is talking about. And it could be one of the biggest things for mobility, as I said.
All right, Taylor, so I want to get your opinion on kind of a price prediction here with what they're opening. They opened at 16. I'm just going to jump to TradingView real quick. Opened at 16
what are we at right
today.
now?
Yep, so they're sliding a little bit. By end of day, we'll probably see the $14. It looks like it's, going to get close to maybe to the $14 level. What are your thoughts on this one in terms of long term here in the next, say, 60, 90 days?
So that's too short of a time horizon for me.
You feel like this is long term?
Yeah, this is a long term company. I think what you can see is that their price to earnings. Compare that with Didi to Uber and Lyft, and I think you'll have your answer there alone. But also just how many everything we've been talking about. Again, this is just right now, if I do the math, probably an $84 billion valuation right now versus Tesla versus Uber and Lyft. It's not really a fair comparison because it's just so, I wouldn't say it's relatively undervalued compared to the others. It has a phenomenal future ahead, and it's the dominant player in the biggest market. The other thing, like the Chinese, they only 28% of Chinese citizens have driver's license. In the United States, it's 69%. So
right.
A lot fewer people. Also, more people moving to the cities. In 2029, they expect that 70% of China's population will live in cities. The 5 cities alone for Didi account for something like 40% of all of its rides. So cities are a big thing for Didi, and China, it can be fine even if it never expands outside of China. The fact that it is expanding outside of China this early tells you something.
Well, and I think, when you look at the overall aspect of this particular company, just the fact that you're getting to access their financials, start to see some of the fundamentals of this company by itself, this is definitely one of those longer plays in essence, if much like my own, investment strategy with companies like Tesla and ARK and, all of the EV stocks out there, including NIO. This is one of those things that really starts to pay off, I think, in the next 2 to 3 years, which is really where this is going to start to shine in terms of some of these emerging markets outside of China, and then also just the potential penetration and more efficiency that they're going to be able to develop and or apply there in the country of China, which is going to be essentially one of their biggest markets, if not, well, it will be the biggest market for them. So yes. It's going to be fun to watch, that's for sure. So Taylor, it's always good having you on to talk about these kinds of moves, especially around these Chinese companies that are moving into the United States in terms of the financial architecture. So we definitely want to keep a close eye here on Didi. Guys, of course, if you're tuned in here, Make sure and continue to watch these shows right here on YouTube. You can subscribe. That's the #1 way you can help the channel. And of course, you can always hit me up on Twitter @Paul Barron. Hopefully, we'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.